Welcome to the Savvy Property Investors Podcast, a weekly show that delivers the best hard-hitting property industry news, business advice, and talks that will get you ascending in the real estate industry. Now, here's your host, the amazing award-winning property and business coach, best-selling author, and serial entrepreneur, Miss Sapphire Gray.
Welcome to another Savvy Property Investors Show. Our guest this week is Nilüfer. She will be sharing with us property development and raising finance for your development projects. Nilüfer is the head of property finance and she works in a corporate banking for 14 years. She now works for a commercial brokerage firm as head of the property finance at Funding Track. Nilüfer spends her time helping clients develop, evaluate, strategize, and putting into operation measures to make a company successful. Specifically, Nilüfer's expertise lies in the property sector, where she specializes in property investment and development finance. A customer-centric business person at heart, Nilüfer is extremely passionate about building strong relationships to harness deep understandings of the business, personal needs, and financial goals. A true property finance professional, she is able to source bespoke financial solutions for property investors and developers, including first-time buyers. I am Sapphire Gray, your host, so let's get us started. Nilüfer, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Sapphire, and thank you for that fantastic introduction. Can I take you everywhere with me, please?
Yeah, brilliant. Well, it's only true on what I've read about your bio, and it's very impressive as well. And I know you're very, very an expert and very good at what you actually do for your clients. And I would say more, you are really focused on your clients because you do pay due care and attention towards them as well. So well done on all your achievements.
Thank you very much. I mean, clients are the center of what we do, and you know they mean everything to us in the finance industry. And yes, you're right in terms of I do make them the center of everything I do in terms of assisting them through their journey and help them be successful in what they do.
Brilliant. I love that, because if you're not customer focused, well, who's going to be in? And you've got to keep your customers happy. And a lot of companies don't know how to do that nowadays. But I could see that you're very successful at it, and you know, praise you for it, because I love the focus on customers, because that's how you retain them, and that's why they always will come back. So it's brilliant.
100% true. Thank you, Sapphire.
You're so welcome. All right, let's dive in to your first question. Do you see a lot of women in property development?
I am seeing more and more women coming into the property development sector. At Funding Track, we actively want to be part of the movement to encourage and facilitate women in property development and help them not feel intimidated by the fact that the sector has traditionally been male-dominated. By preparing and educating women, there's no reason why they can't be successful property developers. In fact, in October last year, we ran a property developer seminar for helping first-time developers obtain finance. Yeah, and a number of women attended. So we'll be holding more seminars in the future and fully expect women to be in attendance.
Absolutely. And I think it's property investments, finances, it was traditionally dominated by males. You're absolutely right on that, because when I came into the finance space, I was battling with the fact that a lot of people thought I was somebody's secretary, or, you know, they just didn't take me seriously as a finance broker at the time, or somebody that was into investing in properties. So it's kind of, I see with this property development how I like to encourage women to get into it, because I want to see women get into this space, because I think they'd be really good at it. So kudos to Funding Track for really seeing this and being part of that journey for women. Can you tell us a bit about the property market today in the UK and how it has been impacted by this pandemic?
Sure. In actual fact, the construction industry is one of the few sectors that has been minimally impacted by the pandemic. There was initially a short period where construction work had ceased. However, contractors were back on site very quickly, and there's no reason to believe it will slow down again. I'd say the most recent impact on the industry was seen following Brexit by the rise in cost of building materials. Developers dealt with this by making changes to the cost analysis and by increasing the contingency within their budget. So it didn't have a massive impact in the industry in slowing it down.
Okay, brilliant. And because, I know the cost of materials went skyrocketed for a period of time because they weren't able to get the raw materials in. But now that it's kind of leveling out, people are adjusting their funding costs to accommodate the rise in materials as well. That's brilliant. Speaking to our listeners who are thinking of coming into the property development for the very first time, is it difficult to obtain finance?
Definitely not. As long as you've done your research properly and the numbers make sense, there are lenders who will provide first-time developers with the finance they need for a project.
Okay.
What I'd say is first-time developers tend to think they can make more profit by using friends and family for some of the labor work. One thing to bear in mind is lenders will not be keen to take these cost savings into account when assessing a loan. So when providing the building cost breakdown to a lender, the client should incorporate costs for the building works using an experienced contractor, even if the costs will be different using friends and family for the labor.
Makes sense. So that leads us into the next question then. When you talk about cost analysis, how do lenders assess how much you can borrow?
Okay, so the first thing I would advise is learn your acronyms. There are 3 key metrics that developers should take into consideration. The first metric is LTGDV, which is loan to gross development value. This ratio relates to the amount of loan compared to the gross development value, or in other words, the end value of the project once the build works are completed. The second metric is the LTC, loan to cost. This ratio relates to the amount of the loan compared to the combined value of the property when it was purchased and costs associated with the build. And then the final metric is LTV, which is loan to value, a common ratio used in mortgage lending in general. And this is essentially the amount of the loan compared to the value of the property when purchased.
Excellent. And where can they find these acronyms? Because sometimes when people find acronyms, you go on to your friend Google and start searching them. Is it anywhere on your websites or anywhere that people can actually learn about these different acronyms so they can get their costings and analysis done properly?
Sure. So on the Funding Track website, you will be able to access a learning page which will have the acronyms and explanations there. Also, if you Google property development in general, there should be a list of the acronyms. So the 3 to look out for are LTGDV, LTC, and LTV.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Alternatively, you can call your broker or a broker in general, and they should be able to sit you down and have a conversation with you and walk you through the acronyms and what sort of things lenders will look for when assessing property development finance. Now, different lenders will provide a maximum loan amount using all 3 metrics, not just one. So brokers do tend to approach different lenders depending on how much you need to borrow and what the figures they work out are for those 3 metrics.
But I find that as well, when you're looking at finding a broker, this is more on a commercial side of things, and not every broker specializes or has a very view on what development finance to find. That's why I liked Funding Track, because I could ask the questions from a development point of view, as opposed to just a normal residential broker or somebody like that who just knows lenders in the commercial space. There
Sure.
is a distinct difference as well, because it's the language that is being used, and there's a different way of working at and cost matrix as well. So I always say, when you're looking at a broker, try to assess whether they are specialists in development finance and commercials and things like that, as opposed to just residential, because you'll find that some of them will have limited knowledge in this space. And then
Agreed.
funding, go ahead, please.
Yeah, agreed. I'd say the best way to ascertain whether they are specialists in development finance is ask for copies of case studies of finance that they've raised for other clients in the past. And you'll be able to see clearly whether they are specialists in property development finance or not.
Brilliant. So can you give us some examples of different types of projects, as you've just said, projects our listeners can look out for?
Sure. There are different scales of property development.
Mm-hmm.
There are refurbishment projects where you may be fitting a new kitchen or bathroom in a property.
Yeah.
There are extensions where you can add a conservatory or additional rooms. There are conversions where you have planning permission to convert, for example, a house into flats. There are ground up developments where you demolish the existing structure and replace with a new building or buildings.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are so many variations of property development. I'd say the important thing is to make sure there is appropriate planning in place. This is unless you're buying a property with the intention of applying for planning yourself.
Mm-hmm.
What I'd say in that scenario is that you should speak to a good planning consultant prior to purchasing that property or land in order to establish what realistic planning permission could look like for the site, and also if the project will be sufficiently profitable.
Right. Excellent. So join us after the break with more insights from Nilüfer.
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button below. Our podcast is only made possible by great listeners like you.
And welcome back. Thank you so much for sharing so much great insights at the first half of our show. It's been really interesting to learn more about the different types of projects that is available out there, how to do cost analysis, and the 3 acronyms that people need to learn in order to understand how to work out their projects. So say we have listeners with development projects ready to finance. How easy is it to access finance, and why use a broker?
Well, for one, if developers stopped using brokers, I'd be out of a job.
Right.
No, seriously though, usually I find that the client's lender's knowledge is typically limited to high street or possibly 1 or 2 challenger banks. In actual fact, there are over 100 different lenders out there that do property development finance.
Okay.
Firstly, I'd say high street banks don't usually provide finance to first-time developers. Additionally, property finance is actually quite complex, and not all lenders do the same thing. The way I see it is, if you need your roof fixing, you can Google or YouTube it and try and do it yourself to potentially save money, or you can hire a good roofer and do it properly the first time.
True.
It's exactly the same with brokers. They're a part of your team, and when you find a good one, hold on to them with both hands.
Yeah.
I mean, the additional expense by using a broker is the broker fee. And as a developer, there are 2 ways to look at sourcing development finance. You can either use time to save money or use money to save time. The choice is yours. If you are thinking of using a broker, though, what I'd say is a good idea to check if they are FCA regulated, members of the NACFB, which is the National Association of Commercial Finance Brokers, and do they have professional indemnity insurance? And as mentioned previously, do they have case studies for similar deals that they've done in the past?
Absolutely. I agree with all of that. And I always say to my clients as well, do your due diligence, because if you don't, it would only come back on yourself because you didn't do the research that you should have done. And always give them the information that they need to do that research with. And you've just highlighted some of them are they FCA regulated? Have they got the insurance to cover their thing? Because when you're FCA regulated, you have to have a proportion of money in. If anything goes belly up, then you can compensate prospective customers, clients. So all of these things they need to take into consideration when looking at finance companies to do business with. And yeah, it is worth spending money to make more money, because when you spend out on a broker, you're going to get the deal done. So the quicker you get the finance in place, the quicker the deal gets done, the quicker you're in, out, and then you're making your profits that way. And you factor that in as well into your costings to make sure that it actually works out for you. So when you're factoring the costings for a finance broker, a solicitor, and all those other additional costs that may come with it, that if the deal still stacks up, then go ahead, because it's the quickest way of getting funding for your projects. So thanks for sharing that.
That's okay. What I'd add is that if a broker is FCA regulated, then they have accountability as well. So they have to do things in a specific way, which is fair for the customer. One of the key things that the regulator is keen on is TCF, which is treating customers fairly. Which means that we can't favor one client over the other, and our processes have to be clear and transparent.
Absolutely. And it's always about receiving the information from your broker as well, because every time I know I've done deals, I've had to sign off from my broker to say that I was satisfied with the work that was carried out. And those are the things that they've put in place to protect the consumers now when they're getting into borrowing money or doing anything financial as well. So what information do you need from the client to source finance?
I would say I need all the basic information. So the property address, the purchase price, what work is involved in a development project, which parties are involved, if there is planning in place, if required. I'll also need a development appraisal. This is essentially a breakdown of the costs of the project and the gross development value. At Funding Track, we do have a generic template that we can share with our clients to assist with creating a development appraisal. And then on receipt of all the above information, I can complete a full assessment and then discuss financial options with my client.
Nice, brilliant. So what would you say the key challenges are for a property developer?
I would say the number one challenge is getting your professional team in place. And this is not limited to your building contractor, but I think you already covered this previously. Also includes your accountant, solicitor, broker, planning consultant, and so on. But once you have a strong core team in place, doing more future projects becomes a lot easier.
Yeah, I call it the power team, because once you've got a strong power team behind you and know how they work as well, and working in sync with one another as well, because if one is more slower at doing the paperwork or something like that, it then holds up everybody else. So once you've got a really good team, hang on to them, because other projects it just gets, the speed will be up there, and then you're all making profits because you're all in tune with one another. So when you get a good team together, try and hang on to them, I always say. Is there any other further advice you'd like to give our listeners?
3 words: don't give up.
Excellent.
It is expected that issues will arise in any project. The key is to deal with them head on. That's why you surround yourself with the experts in the field. If you have planning issues, speak to your planning consultant. If you have financial issues, speak to your broker. I mean, property development can be rewarding, but if it was easy, everyone would do it. What I'd say, Sapphire, is when talking with existing clients who have completed development projects over the years, the one thing I've found, which they all have in common, is that even with the challenges they have faced as a developer, it is a very fulfilling process. You start off with a piece of land or a derelict property and see it transform into a beautiful building through value you have added to the project, as well as hopefully made a lot of money from.
Yeah, I love that. And that, for me, is always the joy when you've seen something that you've put your hand to, you've put your design on, and then see it come to life. it just gives you a sense of achievement, and then you want to do another one and another one. It becomes very addictive to try and always finding different projects to do and expanding your mind and things. So I hope our listeners, I hope you've enjoyed this show. So Nilufer, please share with our listeners how they can contact you and learn more about your services that you offer.
Sure. You can either go to the Funding Track website, which is www.fundingtrack.com. Alternatively, you can find myself on LinkedIn. That's Nilufer Nathu on LinkedIn, and you can add me there and message me. Alternatively, you can give us a call directly, and I'm going to try and remember the number off the top of my head. It is 0203 857 3030.
And thank you for that. And we'll be sharing definitely all of the contacts as well in our feeds. So look out for those contacts. So thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure and getting a great insight into what you do at Funding Track, but not only that, what you do as a person for your clients, because it seems that, as I said before, you're very knowledgeable, and going through this process and learning a bit more about you and Funding Track has been an excellent experience. I've learned a lot myself, and that never be afraid to get into development and never be afraid to just ask for the funding, because you never know whether you're going to get it or not. And once you go through your due diligence and you go through Funding Track to see what if funding is available to yourself, I'm sure you will be able to start building out your property development as a man or as a woman. And I hope the women out there that are listening, that you feel very comfortable in now moving yourself forward in building out your property business as a property developer. Join us next week on the Savvy Property Investors Show. Don't forget to take flight and subscribe, rate, review, and download, and definitely share. We'll see you next week. Thank you for joining us today.
This week's episode of the Savvy Property Investors Podcast was brought to you by our sponsor, the Savvy Women Group. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's show, head over to our website, www.savvywomen.co.uk, to gain access to our free resources and more insights about our guest speaker today. Remember, we make your business our business, so you can unlock your full potential and improve your quality of life.